Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into, well, a surprisingly potent piece of source material. It's Denzel's article, The Ouija Board, a recovery metaphor.
Yeah.
Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. A Ouija board.
Yeah.
How does that relate to serious self-work, to recovery?
It sounds a bit odd, maybe even a little spooky at first.
Right. But honestly, the connections the article draws between this, simple object and the really challenging path toward healing are quite remarkable.
They really are.
Because when you think about recovery from addiction, mental illness, trauma, whatever it might be, it's rarely straightforward, is it?
Definitely not linear.
No.
Yeah.
It's often described as this mysterious journey, sometimes pretty painful, and it demands, well, huge introspection, real courage, just to even start looking at those uncomfortable truths about yourself.
And that's really our mission today. We want to unpack this unusual metaphor piece by piece to show you how the Ouija board, just in its basic form, kind of mirrors the complexities of that whole inner journey. It captures those phases of recovery that feel, well, bewildering, maybe even frightening at times, but are ultimately, hopefully, illuminating as you move toward healing.
Okay. Let's get into it then, starting with the basics, the physical stuff in the metaphor. If you picture the board itself,
right,
it's this flat surface, letters, numbers, symbols printed on it. What does the board stand for here?
So the board represents the individual's present reality. It's like the immediate visible landscape of their struggle.
You're here and now.
Exactly. Think of the letters and numbers as the actual symptoms they're dealing with right now, the, direct consequences of their actions, the specific challenges laid out.
Like an inventory.
Pretty much an inventory of the current problems right there on the table. So maybe for someone struggling with anxiety, the board might have avoidance, panic, isolation written on it, metaphorically speaking. It's the current map.
Okay, that makes sense. And then on that map, you have the planchette, the little pointer thing that moves across the board.
And the planchette, well, that's a perfect symbol for the individual, especially in the early stages of recovery.
How so?
Because they often feel completely adrift. Like they're just this passive instrument being pushed across that surface reality by forces they don't really get, That early stage so often involves feeling helpless, like you're just watching your life happen instead of driving it.
Like something else is in control.
Precisely. You know you're moving, but the direction feels kind of random, or like something external is dictating it.
Okay, so if the planchette is us, feeling adrift, then what are the forces, the unseen hands the article mentions that are actually pushing it?
Yeah.
Like the fingers on a real Ouija board.
Those unseen hands are crucial. They represent the big push-pull factors in recovery.
Okay.
So on one side, you've got the internal compulsions. These are those ingrained habits, the insidious patterns of thought, maybe the pull of addiction.
The default settings.
Exactly. Those old mental habits, the deep neural pathways that keep wanting to drag the planchette back towards the same old destructive letters and numbers. That's one really powerful set of fingers pushing.
Okay, the internal pull. What's the other side?
But then kind of opposing that, you have the external support systems.
Right.
Your therapist, maybe a sponsor, support groups, loved ones. They act like the other set of unseen hands.
Guiding hands.
Dieting, yeah, but not controlling. They're applying this gentle or maybe sometimes firm but consistent pressure, trying to nudge the planchette toward healthier spots on the board, toward meaningful answers, towards insights you can actually use.
That's such a powerful duality.
Yeah.
Because that internal compulsion, that whisper of addiction or that ingrained fear, it often feels so much more familiar, doesn't it? Maybe more immediately powerful than the external guidance, which might feel new or uncertain.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constant battle of friction, really. The internal hand feels heavy because it's a habit you've practiced maybe for years. And the external hand is necessary because, let's face it, on your own, sometimes the planchette just seems to circle the same old letters endlessly.
Right.
Repeating the old patterns without ever getting to a new conclusion.
Stuck in a loop.
Yeah.
So we've got the board as reality, the planchette is the individual, and these competing forces. How do you actually get the planchette moving meaningfully? How do you break out of just circling the symptoms?
Well, that brings us straight to the core of the work, doesn't it? The absolute necessity of self-inquiry.
Asking questions.
Exactly. The whole point of using a Ouija board is to ask questions. And that perfectly mirrors the core requirement of recovery. You have to stop just being passively moved around and actively engage in deep self-inquiry.
And these aren't easy questions, I imagine.
No, not superficial stuff. We're talking fundamental, challenging questions like, why did I react that way just now? What deep need is actually being triggered here? How can I genuinely change this outcome next time? It's asking those brave questions that really sets the planchette, your self-awareness, moving across the board in a new way.
And as it moves, it starts generating answers or messages, as the article puts it. The planchette points to letters, numbers,
which the article defines as the emerging insights, the tools you gain, the lessons you learn along the way.
Okay.
But, and this is really crucial, the planchette rarely just spells out, do A, B, and C, and you'll be fine.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't it just... No, the messages it reveals are often fragmented. They feel more like cryptic communications sometimes.
Cryptic how?
Well, it might just point to a single, really pivotal memory, or maybe just two letters, like F and E, and you're left trying to figure out, okay, is that fear? Is it feel? Maybe even forgiveness. You have to work it out.
So that's where the real work comes in.
Yeah.
It's not just about seeing where the pointer lands. It's about interpreting what it means.
Absolutely. That fragmentation is actually quite illuminating because real self-discovery doesn't usually arrive in a neat little package.
No instruction manual.
Right. Think about a breakthrough in therapy, like suddenly recognizing a core belief you picked up in childhood. That moment of recognition itself can be jarring, maybe incomplete.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of reflection, interpretation, often talking it through with someone to translate that raw, maybe cryptic insight into something useful, a coping mechanism, a concrete step toward healing. You have to integrate it.
You have to make sense of the fragments.
Okay.
Okay. So if the planchette is pointing out these difficult fragmented truths, the big question becomes who or what is actually doing the pointing, especially early on.
Yes.
That feeling of the planchette moving on its own brings us to maybe the most compelling part of this metaphor.
Yeah.
The paradox of control.
This is so critical because that initial phase of recovery is so often defined by feeling completely overwhelmed, like you have no control, like you're a victim of your own mind or impulses.
Yeah, think about what people often say when they use a Ouija board. I wasn't moving it, it moved by itself. That feeling of helplessness is such a perfect representation of the initial, seemingly overwhelming power of addiction or the grip of really debilitating mental health struggles. The compulsion feels separate, external.
Yeah.
Beyond your will.
And that feeling is incredibly powerful because, psychologically speaking, those deeply ingrained habits, the destructive thought patterns, the well-worn neural pathways, they're so strong they create the genuine illusion of an external force.
An illusion?
Well, yes. It feels like something happening to you from outside. It's like the old, efficient, automatic part of the brain is telling your conscious self, don't worry, I've got this, just stay on this track, even if the track leads off a cliff.
Wow. Okay, so if the planchette feels like it's being driven by the inertia of past habits, those powerful internal hands we talked about, how does the person start to actually, take the reins? How do they gain agency?
The shift happens gradually as recovery progresses. It happens when the individual starts to consciously interpret those messages. We discuss their own thoughts, feelings, behaviors.
So moving from just experiencing them to analyzing them.
Precisely. They start learning to separate the force of the habit from the self. They begin to recognize, okay, that compulsive behavior felt external, but its source is actually my internalized history, my patterns.
That moment of interpretation, that's where the agency starts to come back.
Yeah.
But isn't there a danger there?
How do you mean?
Well, how does the person know if they're interpreting correctly? How do they differentiate between a genuine, maybe painful insight and just comfortable self-deception? The planchette could easily be subconsciously nudge to spell out rationalize instead of responsibility.
Yes. That is the critical skill. And it's usually developed through that external guidance therapy, support systems combined with consistent personal effort.
So reality testing.
Exactly. You learn to test the messages. Does this insight feel uncomfortable? Does it challenge me? Does it point towards necessary action, even if it's hard? That's often a sign of genuine insight.
And self-deception.
Self-deception or rationalization usually offers instant relief. It makes you feel better without demanding any real change. So the planchette, now guided by this emerging agency, starts moving more deliberately towards the hard answers. And you learn to check those answers with your support system instead of just circling back to the comforting lies of the past.
So you realize the power to choose. The real agency was actually inside you all along.
Yes. The planchette isn't moving you. You are learning, sometimes painstakingly, to guide it deliberately, even when those old habits resist strongly.
That intentional movement, that deliberate guidance, that brings us perfectly to the final step in the metaphor, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Boundaries and closing the session.
Yes.
The source material really emphasizes that deciding to close the session on the Ouija board symbolizes a vital stage in active recovery.
It's the ultimate act of empowerment, really. Once you've gained some insight, once you've started developing that agency, you have to learn to apply control outwardly as well.
Outwardly.
Closing the session is the conscious realization. I have the power to disengage from this communication, from this pattern entirely. It's choosing to say, okay, I've received enough insight for now. I'm stepping away from the board to process and apply what I've learned.
But practically speaking, what does closing the session actually look like in recovery? It's got to be more than just, putting the planchette back in the box.
Oh, much more profound. It's about learning to set really firm boundaries, both internally and externally.
Oh, explain that.
Internally, it means consciously choosing not to feed the compulsive thought patterns, recognizing them when they start and saying, nope, we're not going down that road right now.
Actively stopping the loop?
Yes. And externally, it means definitively disengaging from known triggers. That might mean certain relationships, specific environments, maybe even types of media that reliably invite those old harmful patterns to start spelling out their messages again. It signifies taking back control, choosing a different path that prioritizes your stability over constantly, chaotically chasing those fragmented, challenging answers from the board.
So it's the ultimate shift, really.
Yeah.
From feeling like a reactor, just responding to whatever the planchette says, to being the decision maker.
Yeah.
Actively choosing how and when you engage with those difficult inner patterns, managing your environment, signaling to yourself and others, okay, we are done with this specific conversation, this behavior pattern for now.
Exactly that. It's the journey from feeling adrift, totally reliant on those unseen hands, to becoming the architect of your own next move, guided by the insights you've worked so hard to integrate.
So wrapping this up for you, the listener, the real power of this Ouija board metaphor, I think, is how well it captures the whole complex process. It really highlights that blend of initial mystery, the absolute need for guidance, both internal and external, and that constant interplay between those powerful inner compulsions and the external forces of support that help steady your hand on the planchette.
And ultimately, I think the metaphor really underscores the importance of seeking answers, yes, but also having the courage to face the unknown, those uncomfortable truths about yourself.
Yeah.
And then steadily, sometimes really painstakingly, moving towards a more coherent, healthier future. The board, your current reality, is laid out, but the only way to actually reach a new destination on that board is by taking deliberate, conscious control of the planchette yourself.
Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you to maybe chew on, based on Denzel's article.
Yeah.
If the board represents your reality and the planchette represents you trying to find direction, what uncomfortable truth, what cryptic communication has your personal planchette pointed toward lately? That thing that really requires deeper reflection and interpretation before you can responsibly, consciously close the session on it for a while.
Something to think about.
Definitely. We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.